Welcome back to Voices in Health and Wellness. This is the show where we explore the people and ideas pushing health forward in smarter, more human ways. My guest today is Dr. Dan Leach, a doctor, health systems consultant, and the founder of Valence Health, a new platform focused on creating better health experiences for men. Dan's background is wide-ranging. He's worked in general practice, led projects across NHS trusts and private providers, and advised health systems on how to build services that actually reflect human needs, not just clinical protocols. He also brings a very personal perspective to this work, which we'll get into. But today we're focusing on Valence Health, a new initiative which tackles health, the uncomfortable truth that men are still dying earlier, avoiding healthcare and suffering in silence, often because the current system isn't built for them. So Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Hi, Andrew. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So maybe we could start with the obvious. Why men's health and why now?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? For me, obviously I'm a middle-aged man, but for me, sort of men's health is something that is growing in interest, but historically has been neglected, I think, for a number of reasons. I guess the initial one would be sort of men don't really seek health. Their health-seeking behaviours are sort of a little way behind women, and that's very well evidenced and documented over the years. It's noticing these changes in my own life, sort of as was getting older and thinking there's got to be something that can be done about it, and there must be more out there. So really, I've sort of developed this real interest and passion in trying to improve men's quality of life, from sort of 40 plus, really. We all experience that natural decline in performance and hormone levels and sort of overall physiology. And it's just about trying to improve life as we move forward.
And so with that journey, was there a particular moment that kind of crystallized the need for what you're doing with Valence? Or was it just a kind of a very personal perspective and the gap in the market, as it were?
Well, yeah, I think it was quite personal, actually. So I was sort of in my early 40s and, working as a doctor, as I'm sure you're very familiar with, it's quite a high pressure and high acuity environment, lots of decision making and requiring, high level of focus all the time. And I just suddenly thought to myself that, I'm not performing at the same standard that I was perhaps 5 or 10 years earlier. And it seemed to just, it almost sort of dawned on me. And I guess in reality, it had been quite a gradual change, but, nothing dangerous and nothing untoward, but I just didn't feel as sharp as I was before. At that time, I was working in North America, in Canada, and obviously they're much more market driven than a lot of European healthcare services. So I did a bit of research around it and started looking into hormone deficiencies and also other physiological parameters like thyroid and just general metabolism and physiology aspects. The evidence is there, but it's quite it's quite few and far between. Just sort of looking at this decline in hormone and metabolism levels from sort of 40 onwards, really.
Yeah. So you've worked inside the system, you've worked from outside. So how does this project kind of connect the dots in your various aspects of what you've been doing?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do now in the UK is Valence Health that you remembered, that you mentioned at the beginning there. And what we want to do is sort of join the dots between where the public are, where men between sort of 40 and 65, 70 are, and then the gap between what public healthcare can offer, and we're offering a sort of not just a pathway to better health, but just a better understanding of where they are, on their journey, and their kind of medical journey and also their own lifestyle.
And so if a man was coming to see you, can you talk us through what the sort of typical journey might be for a man in that age bracket as to how you would kind of assess and work with them?
Yeah, so they would, initially we'd have a free consultation for them just to sort of talk them through where they are and just see if our service is for them. We're not looking at trying to catch anybody out. It's a real two-way journey. And just sort of talking them through what their concerns are, and what their expectations are for the future, where they've identified problems and where they would like to address that and improve on who they are, and we use the sort of tagline of hormone intelligence. So we're trying to improve the understanding of an individual of where their body is at that time, but then also together working forward with a plan and helping them realize those expectations, I guess, to bring them back to peak performance of where they can be at that time. I'd love to be able to guarantee they could feel like they were 20 again, and that would be great. But in reality, we have quite a few patients sort of coming back to us saying, they feel like they're back in their 30s, and this is men that are in their 50s at the time. So, that's quite a nice achievement to do that.
What do you think are the biggest failures in how current healthcare services are approaching men's health? If we really kind of drill down, what are the issues?
So I think there's a couple of factors. That's quite a big question. There's a couple of factors. So the first one will just be recognition that men have a decline in hormones. We all know about the menopause in women. There's this really sudden decline, usually late 40s, early 50s, over a year or two. And it because it's so rapid, symptomatology is great. They get really large symptoms of menopause. We all know about those. But in men, that's just not recognised in the health system throughout the world. I think that is growing, but certainly in the NHS, it's not recognised. It isn't very well published. But that body of thought is growing. The next one would be the difference between optimisation and treating disease. So the NHS focuses on disease rectification. So, for example, if your thyroid isn't working very well, you get thyroid supplementation, but you have to meet certain criteria for that. If your testosterone levels are low but in the normal range, the NHS wouldn't treat you. But if it's abnormal and you have something called hypogonadism, then it would treat you. And I guess that's kind of public provision, service provision, and sort of allocating that fairly. But what we can do at Valence Health is what's called optimisation. So your hormone levels drop off and a lot of your physiological levels drop off, quite gradually from sort of 40-ish plus, and that demise continues over time. So what we look at doing is optimising. So still using safe parameters and the normal ranges, but our argument would be when you're 40 or 50, why shouldn't your hormone levels be where they were when you were 20? Why shouldn't you feel as good as you did then? Why shouldn't your energy levels be that high? Your concentration levels be the same or similar to they were? So we look to optimize everything and bring everything right up to the top level of safe. Everything's done safely and with GMC registered doctors, but really just optimizing and pushing things right up to the top. So improving that hormone intelligence with everybody.
Thank you. I think we were talking before, you mentioned that many men feel alienated by healthcare. What do you think that's about? Do you think it's some of the issues you've already mentioned, or are there other things behind that?
I think it's really interesting, I think this awareness of health and longevity, especially for men, has really increased over the last few years. There's always this feeling that, us as men are invincible. We can put up with anything. We never have anything wrong with us. We're the providers and the hunter-gatherers and all that kind of thing, But in reality, I think men do care a lot about their health, but they're either too busy, too career-focused, and just distracted from the important things. We kind of ride this wave of being having high vitality, being able to go to the gym. Our bodies are invincible. We can do whatever we want. But then all of a sudden, the age comes in and we turn a blind eye to it, or men turn a blind eye to it. But I really get the feeling that's changing. Men are wanting to maintain their fitness and health and try and balance out that life expectation. Women do live longer than men, and that's almost certainly due to how we look after it ourselves, and hopefully we can balance that out a little bit.
Thank you. I mean, do you think there is some stigma around some of the non-specific things that might be a result of having abnormal hormone levels, low testosterone, weakness, just non-specific illness, poor emotions, and that's presumably going to affect outcomes if men don't present. But is there some stigma around these kind of low-level things that people are worried about bothering their GPs with?
Yeah, I think definitely, and men are kind of defined by their masculinity. So obviously, androgen is that sort of get up and go and that masculine hormone, and to admit that perhaps it's not as good as it used to be, you know, that's admitting that we're aging. It's admitting that we weren't as good as we were 10 years before, and that's really difficult, you know, and I can understand that. But to admit it and to face it and then look for a solution, you know, and to try and improve it, it surely makes you a better and a stronger person, because you can then go back to where you want to be. You know, you can perform how you want to perform. Obviously, there's other things in with there. You know, the sort of the classic concerns that people come to us with. You know, the obvious ones that, you know, sexual performance, libido, erectile dysfunction, concentration, muscle mass. You know, these are all things that are really hallmarks for what society would define as being a successful man, and you know, it's difficult to talk about that. You know, it is really hard, and we understand that at Valence Health, and all of our doctors are sensitive to that, I guess would be the kind of the right way to say it.
Amazing. Are there any particular groups of men who are most at risk of being overlooked, do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's probably the ones that are too busy, you know, to just take the time out. You know, they're recognizing that their performance is dropping, you know, whatever that might be, and their concerns building, but they're just too busy or too distracted. And I think they're the ones that we can help the most, ironically, but they would, you know, and they would definitely see improvements, but you know, they just sort of bury their head in the sand and carry on, I guess. But it doesn't have to be that way, you know, and that's really what we're hoping to change, you know, in things like, you know, like your podcast, Andrew, with, you know, sort of spreading the word and helping educate people about what's available, you know, and what they can do to help improve their quality of life again.
Thank you. So how do you market this with all those things in mind about men and the various issues they're facing? How do you kind of reach them with your marketing message? What's the thing? What are the kind of things that work?
So we have three main kind of branches to our marketing. So we've sort of tried to break down into the three common things that people have concerns about. So the first one would be kind of mental performance and mental agility, that sort of thing. And, you know, that's one of the common concerns that people come to us with. You know, they just don't feel as sharp. They've got that kind of cloudy thinking. Your memory is not as sharp as it used to be. Not forgetful and things, but just not quite as sharp. So we focus marketing on that. The next one is sort of physical performance, so muscle mass and sports performance and that sort of thing. So we angle that largely towards sort of gyms and you know, cycling clubs, climbing clubs, that sort of thing. And then the other one, the sort of the elephant in the room of the sexual performance as well. So again, that's another large area that men have concern with. Mainly focused around erectile health, to be honest. So we try to move away from sort of erectile dysfunction. You know, it's a very negative terminology, and just focusing on erectile health and how we can improve that. And interestingly, it's actually linked into you know, a lot of other conditions that get overlooked. You know, sort of cardiovascular disease and things like that. So with erectile health as well. So you know, we can focus on marketing in those areas and hopefully pick up on what people want.
Thank you. And with that sensitive area about erectile health, how do you make it feel safe and relevant for men to engage without relying on fear or shame? Because it obviously is a very tricky situation to handle. It's obviously very common, but I just wonder I'm very curious to know how you navigate this.
Yeah. So really, what I found is the best way to navigate it is just to be honest and to be open. So when patients first come to us, they fill in a confidential questionnaire, so they can raise the concern then, and that opens the door to the discussion straight away. So you know, that makes life a lot easier. But other than that, it's just part of the kind of initial consultation that we have. You know, this free kind of chat through concerns and expectations, and really, I've found anyway that the best approach is just to be open and honest and sensitive, you know, so just straightforward questioning about whether that is a concern or not. And I found actually that a lot of men are quite relieved, you know, when you just ask them that question straight out, you know, It's not in a kind of a playful or a boisterous way or anything like that. It's just a nice straight question about erection health and frequency. Yeah, most people seem to answer it pretty honest. Well, I assume they answer it honestly, but they certainly seem to. And it's really, really common, and that's part of educating people around this concern. Is it's really common, especially when men get to sort of 40 plus into their 50s, certainly into their 60s. This is really common, and it's so easy to fix, in the majority of times, and we can really transform people's quality of life, and their relationships sometimes are in danger because they're not where they used to be, and we can help support them through that, through medication, but also really just make a difference to them. We also can quantify erection health as well. So we use a device made by a company called Firmtech, which is it actually measures erection frequency and intensity at night, so nocturnal erections, and that's really interesting. So it's evidence-based. It's currently being reviewed by the NHS as well, for urology use, and the loss of nocturnal erections has a real close correlation with cardiovascular disease as well as things like testosterone. So this device, actually, you wear it overnight, and it measures the number of erections you have and how long they are in duration, and also how firm they are. So it can give a lot of information about your cardiovascular health. So we have access to that as a facility as well. And putting all that together and then creating a management plan with kind of measured outcomes, and you can see actually see it in numbers, everything improving. It makes a huge difference to people.
Really interesting. So you mentioned about the general model being about sort of optimization rather than just disease management, as it were. But is there any other things that you do digitally to support patients, or is there anything that you do which is novel to support patients between their appointments?
Yeah, so we have like a kind of a set format of every quarter, every 3 months. We have a kind of a set review, which is looking at biological markers, so blood tests, effectively, to see how they're getting on from a numbers point of view. But numbers only mean half the story. A lot of it's to do with how the patient feels, how their improvements are, and if there's obviously if there's any concerns or if things aren't going as planned. We depending on what they want, basically what people want, we can offer them feedback. For example, we talked about the Firmtech product, so that gives them feedback the whole way through with kind of how they're getting on and improvements, and then also just sort of regular reviews with our team to see how we're doing.
And is there a kind of a holistic approach to this? So you wouldn't just necessarily be doing a blood test, starting people on treatment, but you'll be looking at their whole dietary and lifestyle perspective, looking at their stress and all the other things that can impact on, for instance, hormone levels, and try to address things that way. What's the general kind of holistic approach to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we entirely want to be sort of a bespoke and comprehensive men's health clinic, with that security and confidentiality of remote consultations. So what we found in the past is that people don't necessarily like to come to a clinic, unless they have to, because it gives them real security. We actually do quite a few consultations with people in their cars in the car park. They clearly don't want people eavesdropping, even in their own home sometimes. So you can talk to any of the people anywhere, with complete flexibility. And 100% we offer a full holistic approach, patient-centered approach to where they want to be, and we create a bespoke package for each patient as individual. And the last thing we want to do is be one of these sort of more retail type testosterone providers where they just throw it out the door, and it's not really measured and monitored, and that's not our approach at all. It's really bespoke to each person. And it's not just hormones. You're absolutely right. We focus on all health parameters, so diabetes, cholesterol, thyroid, various other markers, things like DHEA. We can review medical aspects of hair loss, weight loss. whatever it is that people want to focus on, we can do that. And it's just that sort of one-stop bespoke management of your men's health needs, really.
Thank you. I guess you've been developing the model over time and kind of seeing what works. Is there anything that you've tried so far that's completely flopped, no pun intended, or worked better than expected as you've been trying to develop things?
So I think completely flopped. I don't think anything has been a complete failure. The only thing I guess that we reviewed, just different products really, but we that kind of fell through at the sort of research stage, so it never got exposed to the public. And not that there was anything wrong with them, we just didn't think they were suitable. Things that have done better than expected. So the impact it has on people, I guess, would be the big thing. Is, I mean, really, I'm really struggling to think of anybody that we've reviewed that hasn't had a significant impact in their quality of life. Whether that be depression, erection health, libido, concentration, muscle mass. Almost everybody gets an improvement, and that's the really striking thing. It's really nice medicine. It's really enjoyable to do. The patients come in with quite significant concerns. Invariably, they've been bounced around by the NHS and their GP, and that's understandable. It's a busy service. It's not, unfortunately, it's not really there anymore for that sort of lifestyle type problem, and people are just really frustrated. And then all of a sudden they get a service where, they get nice long half-hour appointments. You can really engage in what's going on. You get a great relationship with your doctor, and they're just different people. Almost by 3 to 6 months through. Let alone a year later or 2 years later. They're just completely different people. And I'm trying to think of some of the feedback. Some people have sort of suggested that they're terrified to be without the medication anymore, because the difference is so significant. The idea of going back to where they were is terrifying, and okay, there's a bit of responsibility there, but also what a great thing, if we can make that much difference to people, that's fantastic, and I think that's probably the biggest surprise and impact that has been to me. And then the other things in a more kind of product-based field, the technology coming out for men's health hormone replacement, and then in particular the firm tech product that we use is really interesting. It's really, really interesting. It's so closely correlated to cardiovascular disease and strokes that I think very quickly this sort of thing will be available in the NHS as well, actually, because it's the numbers are just crazy. The link, the correlation is really obvious, and treatment is so straightforward, and it's real preventative medicine. It's stopping people not just having lifestyle problems, but having pathology, having disease. And surely that's what we're all about as doctors.
Totally. Has there been any surprising objections or resistance from men or from within the system at all with your work?
The only resistance is about optimisation, I think, that I've come across. So it's a real mindset change. It's drilled into all doctors, well, certainly that I've come across, and from my own education is, you treat disease. The numbers have to be outside of the normal range before you can give any treatment. And that, for some things that changes a little bit. For example, the first one that pops to head is sort of symptomatic subclinical hypothyroidism. Nice guidance would suggest you can treat that. So, there are some elements where there's a bit of movement there, but generally speaking, if things are in the normal range, normal's normal, and you draw a line under it and forget it. So the big challenge for us has been changing doctors' mindsets to, normal is normal, but it's not optimal. It's not giving, people aren't feeling the way they used to be, and we just don't know what the data is. Someone comes to me in their 40s or 50s and their testosterone's right down in the bottom quarter of the normal range. What was it when they were 20? It was probably right up in the top half or the top quarter. There's no way of knowing because you don't measure it because there's no problem. But why, like I said before, why should it stay there? Why should it stay at this level where they feel terrible, where their muscle mass is dropping off, their energy is dropping off? So it's just changing that mindset. And it's almost like kind of opening the door, you kind of, once you think about optimizing within normal ranges, it's like, well, that's kind of makes a lot of sense, really. We should make people feel better about who they are.
You don't have any sort of kickback from the patient's GPs when you're doing this stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're not be able to provide the service, but when they sort of see you as a provider doing this, do you have any kickback? I mean, I guess you've kind of alluded to it a little bit just now.
Yeah, so I don't know if I go as far as sort of full kickback, but just sort of questioning. I think, they sometimes like rationale around what we're doing. And once we explain that, everyone seems quite happy, to be honest. Most people are quite happy once they understand what we're actually trying to achieve, and more importantly, once they see the benefits to the patient. The GP seem quite happy with that. But yeah, definitely not as completely negative as kickback. Just more questions, I would say.
So, what's next for Valence Health? Where do you want to be in the next 12 months of your work?
So, what we would really like to do is be available to as many men as possible. So it's all about sort of spreading the word and being seen as, the go-to people for men's health. That's where we want to be. And like I say, it's not just hormone intelligence. It's many fields that we cover, and just being that brand that people recognise as safe and trustworthy. If we were thought of in the same way as, the NHS being that kind of flag that can fly, and people can come to us and know that they'll get a good quality service, that would be amazing. And it's about changing people's lives. That's ultimately what we want to do. So if we can have people talking about us in that way, then that's fantastic. I feel like my job is done.
Amazing. And if you did go viral, what would break first?
What would break first?
Yeah. Hopefully not you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, my hairline. I think. Yeah. I mean, the system's designed to be flexible that we've built, and that's one of the great advantages of being an online clinic is we really can grow quite quickly to demand. We use everything's done remotely, so we use phlebotomy services, or blood taking services, so people can be in the comfort of their own homes or their workplace. They can meet the nurses anywhere to take their blood. Again, our pharmacy services are all remote, so it's all mail order, so things get posted to you in discrete packaging and all those kind of things. So we really can just grow as quickly as people need. I don't think they need to fear sort of loss of continuity of service or anything like that.
If I give you a magic wand and you could change one thing about how men access care, or maybe one thing about your business, what would it be?
Well, I think it would be about how men access care, actually, and I think it would just be increased awareness of what improvements can be made. You don't need to turn into that grumpy old man. We sort of joke about the grumpy old man in the corner, and some of our consultations are done actually as with the partner is there as well, and they often say that Joe Bloggs used to be lively and outgoing and sociable and all these sorts of things, and he got to 40 or 50 and now he's just that grumpy old man sitting in the corner, and that's what we want to get rid of. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that men become aware that they don't have to be that. They can still be that person that they want to be and used to be.
Brilliant. So you talked about growing, you want to obviously reach more men. What is the hardest part about growing this? Is it funding, trust, access, or something else?
Yes, yeah, all three of those. Yeah, it's access, I would say, to men, not to our service, but to men. So getting into the right areas, and that's, we've got a fantastic marketing team that are really helping with that, push it forward and building this kind of really trustworthy brand that people can engage with and have ownership with. And that's the challenge, I think, is just getting people to understand that they can trust it and it is moving forward. It's not this retail testosterone that's just all for people going to the gym. It really is a patient-focused solution to their health concerns.
And again, what about the whole growth thing? I mean, if the NHS came knocking on your door tomorrow and said, let's roll this out nationally, what would you worry about most?
Well, I guess being separate to the NHS is, useful because we're flexible. You know, we can change with research, we can change with public demand. So my fear with being under a national service would be that that flexibility and that movement disappears. Yeah, if if that did happen, if the health service wanted it to be a national product, it would still have to have that really high level patient centered approach, and that would be my fear, that would be diluted and lost, and that's kind of my founding principle, is that we are patient focused from the very beginning to the very end, and that can't be diluted for anything, in my opinion.
On that note, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such an incredibly thoughtful conversation. So thank you for speaking so openly about what's often a very private and under-discussed matter. And it's been great to hear about you, your work, and what Valence Health is doing for men's health more generally. So thank you very much. Really good to speak to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew.